Why wild animal suffering is a human fantasy. Here's my case. The phenomenon of wild animal suffering, this idea that there is suffering within nature separate from human beings that's just caused by, disease and hunting, predation, and all kinds of other things. And I dispute this narrative that the wilderness is filled with, all of this tragedy and so on and so forth. And I have multiple reasons as to why. So the first line of argumentation is in line with mechanist philosophy, which I get from Martha Jacques Fresco. Basically the mechanist position is more or less that, life forms act mechanically. And I understand that to be problematic when you come to human beings and so on and so forth. Although humans can act mechanically at times, I would say the vast majority of life forms are mechanical in nature. This is the case for bacteria, this is the case for insects, and so on and so forth. And so the vast majority of life forms are not even conscious, they're not even sentient in any meaningful sense of the word. Rather, they are akin to essentially biological machines. This is definitely the case for fish, for reptiles, and so on and so forth. And so immediately, the vast majority of life forms are not engaged in some sort of struggle, some sort of suffering that, for example, Darwin would have, ruminated on, lamented over even. The next case that I have to make, and it's actually in a book, let me look it up, is in the book Nature, Red in Tooth and Claw, which comes from the famous poem, blah, blah, blah. The full title is Nature, Red in Tooth and Claw, Theism and the Problem of Animal Suffering by Michael J. Murray. Now, this one is misunderstood by a lot of people, but it's sort of hard to wrap your head around easily, but let me try and explain, because it actually makes a lot of sense, and it makes sense of my own personal experiences with, being out in the bush and seeing, animal slaughter and so on and so forth. Basically, what he argues is that most animals, except for humans and, the great apes and so on and so forth, they are limited in their understanding of pain, and so their experience of pain is not in the same way as it is for us, for example. And a good way to sort of think of this is that, how do we explain it? So basically, they are suffering pain, but they don't necessarily attribute it to themselves, okay? And so that sort of, because they don't quite have a sense of self in the same way that we do, very dense philosophical stuff, I know, but if you think about it, if you dare, go watch footage of a Komodo dragon, for example, eating deer, and you will see that a lot of the times the deer do not do things for their own survival. And so it's clear that they have a limited understanding of what's happening to them. And so that is the second part of my argument. The third part of my argument is that even if we are to grant full sentience and so on and so forth, the reason why I disagree with the position of animal suffering, wild animal suffering, is that all of life is inherently a mixed bag. So let's take into account chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are objectively happier when left in the wild. This has been demonstrated time and time again. Chimpanzees do not like to be caged, blah, 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 blah. Even if you feed them and all of this, they don't like it. They like to be left alone to fulfill their natural instincts, to follow their natural instincts, so on and so forth. And so what this shows is that wild animals if they are happier objectively in the wild, living the way that they live, we see this with lions, for example, we even see this with antelopes, and deer and so on and so forth, then what that means is that their life is a mixed bag. And so, yes, it might have a terrible end. Let's be honest, most of us are probably going to have a terrible end. It might have, pain and sort of in different parts here and there, but there would also be incredible joy, or at least a dopamine rush in a mechanistic way for them. And so, again, even if we are to grant full sentience, which I don't, the result is a mixed bag. It is not a situation that is objectively one way or the other.